We keep on hearing about the fact that consumers are in conversations with brand, right? We keep on hearing that it's a two-way street. And everybody's saying, okay, brand have to rethink everything, etc. And it's true only to an extent, because what people tend to forget is that, yes, it's a conversation, but as a brand, you're the first one who speaks.
Welcome to Structural Shifts by Aperture, a bi-weekly show that radically reimagines the future of work, society, and business. We take a devil's advocate approach to exploring the massive shifts transforming our economies and our world, and our guests are not afraid to challenge the status quo. To learn more about Aperture, visit aperture.co. Today, your host, Ben Robinson, is virtually sitting down with Youri SAWERSCHEL of Creative Supply. Youri founded the agency in Zurich in 2015 to be the next generation of branding companies. Youri is a graduate of the Geneva School of Business, and he likes to challenge convention, so we knew that he would be a perfect fit for this show. In this episode, he and Ben talk about the problems with traditional branding agencies and how Youri is switching things up. One way he's doing this is through his workforce. Instead of hiring a bunch of people, Youri is tapping into a network of independent creatives, and this gives his company and his clients access to the best talent at scale. In addition to this, you'll hear Youri and Ben talk about how Youri's company went from being a Tinder-like agency to a true creative partner, why branding is the cause and the solution to so many of the world's biggest crises, how brand storytelling differs from other kind of storytelling, and why it's kind of like murder. And if you are intrigued by that, then stay tuned for today's Branding Masterclass with Youri. Enjoy the show.
Youri, thanks very much for joining the podcast. Wanted to kick off with a pretty broad question, which is, what is the role of a brand in the digital age?
Well, if we look at branding before, or the role of a brand before the digital age, it's very much about trust, right? If you were in the 50s, you wanted to go travel to a Hilton. So you thought, well, if I go to a Hilton, I'm going to have a hot shower and nobody's going to rob me. So brands were very much about identifying quality service for people. In the digital age, this has changed a little bit because it's much more transparent, right? You don't need to stay at a Hilton to be sure that there's going to be Wi-Fi, right? If we use the hotel example. So the role of branding is a little bit more subtle. It's more about building up association of ideas, right? If we think about B2C, right? If I buy this brand, what does it say about me? If I am a customer from this brand, what signal do I send to the people around me? And that's pretty much the role of brand, which is going to be more about increasing the perceived value, right? I think fundamentally a brand is about reducing perceived risk and increasing perceived value at the same time. In a B2B setting, it's still very much about decreasing perceived risk, right? Let's say you want to buy machine tools for millions from a new supplier. It's very hard to decide which one is the best because you look at all the criteria. So the brand is the thing that's going to make the difference. It's going to make you feel, okay, I can trust them. So I think in the digital era, the branding is more and more about increasing the perceived value and maybe a little bit about reducing the perceiving risk in a B2B setting.
If branding's about creating an association of ideas, then it doesn't really work, does it, to try to micro-target, right? Because we might be able to stimulate demand maybe by micro-targeting, but we can't create brands by micro-targeting, right? Because, as you said, they're a statement about ourselves and a sort of lifestyle that we aspire to in many ways, right?
I think all marketing practitioners will not fundamentally agree with what I'm going to say, but marketing is very tactical. It's about defining, your 4 Ps type of thing. What product you have, what price, which channel you use, etc. But what we miss most of the time is that these levers that we can use in marketing, coherent with something bigger, which is what the brand is, right? And which is much more strategic. So what is your positioning? What do you stand for in the market? What are your key message? How do you frame a brand? How do you present it to the world? And once this is clear at the strategic level, then you can go down to the operations or the tactic and decide, okay, we're going to distribute our whiskey brand. We're going to distribute it more into exclusive concept store rather than in duty free to show that we are an exclusive brand because we are positioned as an exclusive brand. So I think that two different things, right? And this whole micro targeting really comes at a very tactical stage. So
do you think that, we've seen a rise of, some kind of short-term tactical pursuits versus the long-term strategic stuff like brand building?
Well, I think we see obviously a lot of short-term type of tactics anyway, but I think they're not going to build brand equity in the long term because, yes, you can increase your followers by 20% in a week, but what does it say about your real brand equity? Maybe not much. What I think is really interesting when we speak about digital era is that, and you mentioned it, we keep on hearing about the fact that consumers are in conversations with brand, right? We keep on hearing that it's a two-way street. And everybody's saying, okay, brand have to rethink everything, etc. And it's true only to an extent, because what people tend to forget is that, yes, it's a conversation, but as a brand, you are the first one who speaks. You are the first one who speaks, which means you can define who you are. You can frame yourself. You can position yourself. And then people can react to this. They can agree with it, not agree with it, think it's good, think it's bad, and then the conversation starts. But the framing, the positioning upfront of a brand at the digital level, it's still a one-way street. And I think people tend to really, really forget that and kind of just think that the brand is just something that, is going to be a completely shared, intangible thing. But actually, it first is something that is created by someone. A brand doesn't appear because people think it's there. First, someone give a direction, and then people have association of ideas. And then, yes, the brand is in the mind of the people who are the audience. But in order to have an audience, you need to produce something first. You see what I mean? And I think it's something that's completely overlooked in this digital marketing era, where you have all those digital-driven agencies that just speaks about engagement and conversation, but they totally miss the point about what is the message you have and what is the content. Just this morning, I was in conversation with one of the big digital agencies in Switzerland, and those guys are trying to sell me services to take care of my Facebook ad and Google ad, etc. But by discussing with them, and they want to charge you 4, 5, 6, 10K a month as a retainer. And then I'm really trying to understand, and maybe I sound a bit stupid, but what is it exactly that they do? And then it comes down to, we look at keywords and we kind of make recommendations, and you're like, well, that's a lot of money for just looking at things. But then they're like, because, then you're going to push some really good content. And I'm like, but who does the content? Oh, yeah, this you provide us. So it really goes down to something that was there before digital and is still here after digital, which is what you have to say and the value you offer through content is going to, in my view, definitely overtake all those short-term tactical exercises you can do.
And what about separating product from brand? If you've got a great product, people will tell each other. So and in a world where everything's more transparent, does it shift the balance towards sort of, investing more in product marketing, or to put it another way, can you have a mediocre product, a good marketing team, and beat a company with good product and a mediocre marketing team?
It depends what your internal benchmark for quality and value is. But if you have a mediocre product and a very strong brand, chances that you're not going to last forever are very high. So I think from the worst, which would be a fad, to something which would be a trend, to something which might be around, but then it's going to die off, at some point, it's not going to fly, and it's not going to be a brand you really would get people to invest in, I think. Especially because then you create a gap between the messaging you send, saying, oh, we are an amazing brand, etc., but actually the product is crap. And this gap into messaging and reality needs to be managed very, very carefully in a digital era. Back then it wasn't the case. A good product is a key success factor. You need it to be in the game, right? But a good product alone, it's not going to cut it. If you have a very good fashion brand or a very good academic program, I have some example about this, or you have a very good boat rental service, it's not enough. And we see it over and over and over again. We've got companies, big, small, that come to us. They have a really, really good, strong offering, good customer service, good product, but they just don't manage to generate a premium out of it. And then we can help them with the commercial work we do, really to help them increase that perceived value and reduce the perceived risk of buying them. But we can only do this because the base product is good. And if the base product is shaky, when advertising is basically misleading and lying advertising type of thing, and I think it's a very dangerous slope to be on.
So, a brand starts the conversation, but it is a two-way conversation, and arguably the customer is much, much more influential than they were, pre-digital.
Yeah.
Both in terms of acting as an ambassador for the product, but also, I guess, in a sense, in shaping the product, right? Because you can get that feedback in a way that you couldn't when you didn't have so much direct access to the consumer. So how important does the consumer become in shaping the brand? Now that two-way street is possible?
I think it depends really which type of companies we're talking about. In reality, in theory, yes, consumers involved in everything, etc. In reality, there's only big groups that can afford, for instance, different focus group and having different market testing, etc. Only big FMCG companies can afford this. As soon as you are in the mid-sized segment, companies don't have the time or the cash to do this type of things. So yes, they're going to involve the customer in the sense that they will collect their feedback, for instance, upfront, etc. But you won't have that collaborative process. I think there's two schools of thoughts when it comes to involving customers, actually. I'm on the one that have the feeling that you should not involve them too much because people actually don't really know what they want. They don't really know why they buy things. And if you ask them, they don't give you the right reasons. The typical example is the iPhone or the iPad that everybody knows. Nobody would have said, I want an iPad or I want an iPhone. I think it was Henry Ford who famously said, if you had asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. I think we need to be careful with involving too much people in the creation process because we need to test it when we can. But from the creative input, I'm not sure how valuable this is. We need to understand who the people are and what they want overall, but I wouldn't make them co-creator. A long time ago, there was a very small business in Geneva, actually, that was called Les Loisirs. And what they do is boat rental service, right? So basically, you pay a money upfront in order to rent a boat over the summer. Quite expensive because you need to have a boat license. You pay at least, $3,000 minimum for the season. And the business was not going so well. And the owner asked a bit my help. We kind of had an agreement when I helped him out. It's a very, very small local business. If I had asked the current customers, what do you think about the service? They would have said, yeah, it's great. I've got my boat. It's good money. There's not too many people involved. Nothing to be changed. So this insight is absolutely not valuable from a brand building point of view. However, what we understood was, there is money left on the table because this business is positioned as a local hobby, while it should be positioned as a private club. And if we're positioning as a private club, we can drive the revenue up and we can make it much more attractive for a target segment. So we rebranded the whole thing to Boat Club Geneva, and then which is not original, but which does the trick. It corresponds to what the target audience expect. And then once we rebrand this whole thing to the Boat Club Geneva and told the story about an exclusive club in the center of Ovive on which you can be a member, not a client, a member, the sales picked up. And it picked up because we didn't ask the client what they wanted. So that's why I think, yes, we need to listen to customer. Yes, if we see that something doesn't work, we definitely need to tweak and test and try until it works, 100%. But at some point, you need to take the cut and say, okay, we're going to do it that way, because that's how we can drive a premium. Branding is about driving a premium. And if you ask customers, they're never going to tell you, I would love if this product was 25% more expensive because you tell me a better story about it, even though we know we can do it. Yeah.
Is that how you measure the success of a brand then? The extent to which it creates loyalty and the ability to charge a premium?
The way we look at it, we look at branding from a very business perspective, which is if you do branding, you need to be able to drive a premium on your business. And you need to be able in the long term to lower your marketing cost because people want to be part of it. So you don't have to advertising so much because people want to speak about you, be it the press, etc. So we see it now with EMBA program we worked on in Switzerland, and we really helped them reposition their brand, their whole program. We didn't touch the syllabus, right? Because that's not our job. And we've seen an increase in 30 or 35% of applicants. And this is just by branding. And we're talking about EMBA in top universities in Switzerland. So you would think people are rational when they look for EMBA, right? They would look at the syllabus, look at who the professors are in the syllabus, and decide based on the syllabus and the fees whether this makes sense or not. But that's not how people choose an MBA. They choose it because, does it tell a story I want to be part of? Is it something I'm proud to walk around with?
How do you persuade people to come to you? How do you win clients, and how do you also charge a premium for the work that you do?
You mean us as creative supply?
Yeah. Or a branding agency in general.
The way we manage to get clients and really build the reputation of the firm, because we're only a 5 years old company, but we're really, really growing strong. It's really a 2-step process, actually. It's so simple, but I'm happy to share it because nobody's going to do it. You need first to have really clear, good content. And when I mean content, I speak about intellectual property, which means models, framework, analytical skills. We're not selling a vacuum cleaner where I can tell you, try it, if you like it, you buy it. What I'm selling you is our intellectual capacity to build your brand. So the best way I can do that is by sharing with you some models, some framework, some reports, some things where you thought, okay, those guys understand what this is. It's very easy to do. It's very easy in theory. It's very hard in practice because, 1, you need to have the capacity to do it, 2, the discipline, and 3, distribute it. And then once this is done, well, you distribute it and you share your content to as many people as you can, and you use that content to open doors. And for us, the doors have been pretty much, half of the startup incubator in Switzerland, some of the top universities in Europe and in Switzerland, trade associations, magazine, trade press, because we provide them with valuable content, which is not selling our service, right? Nobody wants to be sold. Everybody wants to buy. Edward Bernays mentioned this in his book in the 30s. He was right. Nobody wants to be sold. Everybody wants to buy. And we have to provide that. And we've been very, very good from the beginning, from day one, in investing in content. And I'm not talking about just writing random articles to crowd everybody's Google, but really think, what are the models? How do we look at branding? How do we do branding for B2B, for instance? And then we've done interviews of 20 executives across Switzerland about the question B2B branding. And the result is a report on the topic that we've made in collaboration with the EMBA of EPFL. And once you have that and you go to clients and you say, hey, you want us to help you in B2B branding? Oh, if you want, you can have a look at our report on B2B branding that we've done with, guess what? The second best technical school in Switzerland. The pitch is very high. So now you can have someone who just become a B2B branding consultant, but what premium can he charge? And we are basically reducing the risk, right? Earlier in the discussion, I was saying a brand is about reducing the risk and increasing the perceived value. By bringing these content pieces, we reduce the risk. You think if you're a potential client, okay, if those guys are able to actually publish something with EPFL, it cannot be that bad. So they trust us.
So what was step 2?
For me, it's 1 is content. 2 is channel, if you want to stay with the C's.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So it's content, channel, and then the 3rd C, if you want one, it's closing, because then you get the client.
Yep. And then after that, community, right?
Yeah, actually, if you want a 4C, you need the community, because, it's getting project is as much about getting than giving. And you cannot have a short-term mentality where everybody you meet is about selling them a project, because then you are a traveling sales guy. Nobody wants that. But if you look at it, we look at it a very long term. And we say, what is the vision for Creative Supply in 10, 15 years? And our vision in 10, 15 years is we want to be the reference in branding, at least in Europe. And if we want to become the reference in branding, we cannot have a mentality where we're just moving from one project to the next, because that is just called cash flow. It's not called being the reference. So we need to grow an ecosystem, a community, to pick up on what you said. And this community is made of what? People we teach at universities, pro bono work we do with young startups that are promising, direct coaching, publication, etc. And we need to have all of this as part of our ecosystem. Some will drive projects, some won't, but in the long term, we can become a reference. And a lot of our competitors don't think that way because, well, they have such a high payroll that they're just driven by getting the next project to pay the bills. But since we have a very different structure, we don't have that. I don't need to sell you a 3D rendering because my 3D guy is sitting doing nothing. I don't care. So I can focus on growing creative supply as the reference in the industry rather than just getting more projects, which is a very short-term way of looking at it.
So community for you is also a bit about creating multiple revenue streams, right? But one of the things you just said there actually was quite interesting, because I was going to ask you that when you said you were working with startups, which is, how do you monetize startup relationships? And I think you answered it, right, by saying a lot of it's pro bono, because I guess, you help them, and as they grow, they come back to you.
Well, actually, the way we deal with startups, we had to draw the line. Is we do pro bono work with startups which are involved with sustainable development. So that's very clear.
Okay.
Any startup that has something linked to green startup, sustainable development, we do typically workshop pro bono with them. Other type of startups, we don't do pro bono, but we cannot do full project for them because we are too expensive, and it doesn't make sense for a startup to spend 50, 100K on a branding project. You just need to be very smart with your resources. What does make sense for a startup is to do a half-a-day workshop where we can give them the key tools, the direction, the clarity, 1-2 hours of coaching here and there. The budget remains very, very valid, and then they can grow with it. And actually, a lot of startups we've helped, and some of them, 2-3 years down the line, they come back and then they got the funding, for instance, and they say, well, now we really need to professionalize this thing. And then they come back. So I think different type of clients, of companies have different type of needs. And you cannot just sell a full branding and a strategic audit to a mid-sized company in Neuchâtel. You know what I mean? So we need to adapt.
And how repeatable are some of the work you do? Because I think it's interesting you've created all these different revenue streams, which is great. But the sort of core engine of your business, which is branding work, how long term is that if you find a client? Or do you just do a rebrand and then move on to the next client?
Interesting you ask this, because you really hit the spot in terms of how we've a bit changed our strategy in the last 6 months. Is we used to be, I call it, a Tinder agency, a one-night stand, or one type of project, right? They come to us, they have a problem. The brand is not clear, the message is not clear. We do the work, and then we bill, and we disappear. And then we move on to the next one, right? The next swipe, to keep the Tinder analogy. And a couple of months back, we realized that there's a few problems with this. Well, the lack of stable cash flow is one, but also from the client side, we realized that we did really good work at the strategic level, and then the implementation really, really failed on the clients because they went for the wrong provider, the wrong supplier, they didn't manage the process well, or they didn't have the skills or the time. And it was not so much a question of budget, more a question of focus and coherence. And so we thought it's really stupid, because then we do all this work, which looks very good on a shiny PowerPoint, and then comes the reality, and it just doesn't look like that. And we thought, okay, let's go away from being a Tinder agency, and let's become a true creative partner, a branding partner for all our clients, where we handle everything from strategy to implementation. In agency jargon, we speak about the long tail, which means that you also do the small things, like a brochure design and a web page design. So we do these things now. It's just that we never do it for clients that need just this. Right? So if someone comes to us and say, oh, we need a poster design, we definitely the wrong agency to do that. But if someone comes to us saying, we need a branding, and then we need someone to work throughout the year for all needs, we can really, really be good at that and make sure that we ensure all the touch points. We work, for instance, with the EEL, which is the private school in Geneva, where we have really taken this role of kind of piloting all their branding and communication effort. And I think it's really paying off.
In preparation for this, I was watching a video of you talking about storytelling. What's the role of storytelling in branding?
The role of storytelling in branding is essentially, storytelling is a tool to explain, share what your positioning is to your audience. So storytelling alone depends from your brand positioning. And depending on the story you tell, you can influence, again, the perception and the association of ideas that people have with your brand. I think the main difference between storytelling when we speak about branding versus, movie stories in movie is that a story in a brand should never have an ending. Because, in all the movies, you have type of linear structure, right? The hero does something, then he has some challenge, he fights, and at the end he wins, and the princess loves him, and then it's the end. But as a brand, you cannot think like this because your brand, you don't want your brand to end. So your story at its heart, at its center, must have an ideal, a concept that a brand can never fully reach, right? Adidas tells us, for instance, impossible is nothing, which means there's always a way to get something further. So it's a story that never ends. Yeah.
You don't feel like some of this storytelling is a bit kind of contrived.
In what sense, contrived?
It's a fabrication. It's clearly a marketing, tool for us to engage with the company. It doesn't feel sort of authentic.
Storytelling is a bit like, murder. As long as you don't get caught, it's fine. And I think if you take, I can mention you at the top of my mind a couple of brands that I don't know. Ted Baker, have you heard of them?
Yeah.
Well, Ted Baker, there's no Ted Baker, right? You would assume that that's the name of the designer, right? There's no Ted Baker. This guy doesn't exist. Simple as that, right? So there's so many brands that, how can I say this, that are telling story that actually are not true. Or Hollister, maybe you know it. It's like a bit of a teenage fashion brand. It says that Hollister is from California and was founded in 1922, but actually the brand is not from California and it was not founded in 1922. The sad truth, or I don't know, it's just that, people don't check, because imagine how many decisions you have to make every day. And if you had to do a full due diligence on every brand you buy, this would take you a lot of time. And customers don't do it. They don't do it, one, because they don't have the time, but two, they also don't do it because they don't want to. Because, it's so nice to buy from this Hollister brand from California since 1922. You don't want to know that this is a lie, right? It kills the fantasy of the brand, especially in consumer branding. What I'm talking about is more consumer branding. I think when it comes to storytelling in B2B, we have to be much more careful with the reference that we use. But the logic is the same. There's a very strong example in B2B actually from Holcim. Holcim is a cement company. And I love it because you would really not expect a cement company to be a benchmark in branding. So when you sell cement, you basically sell stones, crushed stones, right? And those are called ready-mix. And they all have very rubbish numbers, right? They're called LX205, LX206, and those are the product number. And that's how they've been known in the industry forever. And one day, one guy in Holcim thought, well, what if we give names to our cement? So let's call the very strong one Robusto. And let's call the one that's a bit red Rosso. And they spin those names, those Latin names for each of the products or some of the product line. All the industry laughed at them. They took the piece saying, can you believe you are selling LX200? Why do you need to call this Rosso? What do you think you are, an espresso, right? But the client didn't think that way. They thought, this is very good. The red one is Rosso. Everybody knows what I speak about. I like it. So then what happened next is the clients of Holcim, but also of other cement company, went to other cement company and say, hey, we would like to buy some Robusto and some Rosso from you. But the company had no choice to say, oh, sorry, those one are from Holcim, but we have LX205 for you if you like. So the story is very different. We speak about ingredient branding in technical terms. So I think you can tell story at so many levels. It's just they're different, right, from a B2B or B2C.
What makes a good hotel brand? Because I noticed that you guys work with a lot of different hotels. What story should a hotel be selling? What are the association of ideas? What's the lifestyle association that's important for a hotel?
Hotels are in a very difficult situation because, well, yeah, particularly at the moment, I think it's a whole different topic actually. But overall, it's very tough to build brands in the hospitality industry for the one reason that people only stay with you once. And even the best hotel brands out there, and they will never want to share the numbers, but maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 for the best 1% of their customers are actually returning customers. But most of them are just living out of one night stand, literally. So how do you build a brand with people who never come back? The industry just doesn't want to accept that, but they still try to build brands based on that operational proposition, which is so dumb if you think about it, because nobody cares about it since you only stay once. So what hotels have to think about, and I think it's this virus is going to really help them think through, and I think the strongest and the more agile will really, really survive and go well after that, They have to think, if we were not selling rooms, what would we be about? How would we attract people to us? And that's a very, very tough question for most of the hotelier, because most of the hotelier branding pitch or communication pitch is, hey, come to our hotel, great for family, business, couple, or whatever you want. We are good. We have a nice swimming pool, fast Wi-Fi, and breakfast is included. Come stay with us. This is pretty much the messaging of virtually every single hotel brand in the world. Some will throw the word luxury in there, or exclusive in there, or bespoke, or tailored. But they're telling you the exact same story. You take an advertising of Ritz-Carlton versus an advertising of Four Seasons, those things are the same. Just the room design is slightly different. One is beige, the other one is blanc cassé. You know what I mean? So once you start thinking about what the hotel is doing, check-in, check-out, and housekeeping, and you start to think, what is our role? Can we be a curator of something? Can we be an educator? How can we contribute to our large community, not just the local one, right? What role do we take? And for instance, we work with this client in Paris, building a full new brand for them called French Theory. And we thought about it saying, well, it's not a hotel brand. We're something between probably a media company, a retail company that happens to have rooms. And our role is to relay the cultural and intellectual life of Paris 5th arrondissement, 5th district. So once you think about a place like this, your role is not about selling rooms. That's the outcome. That's what happens next. But if you're about relaying the cultural life of a district, there's so many more things you can do. And that's where I think you can build strong hotel brands, because people don't come to you because you have a room with Wi-Fi anymore. So yeah, I think it's a bit, I know I have a slightly controversial view on the topic. We have actually just published, talking about publication, we've literally published last week a full hotel concept handbook in collaboration with the École Hôtelière de Lausanne, which really shows what are those trends happening in the hospitality industry, coronavirus aside, and then what are the steps you need to take in order to build a strong hotel concept, strong hotel branding, ultimately.
Is what you propose enough to see off the Airbnb phenomenon? I mean, let's pause for a second about how Airbnb fares post-Corona, but just ignore Corona for a second.
I love that you bring this, because what Airbnb is doing, it's dematerializing the hotel offering. It's saying, well, you don't need to go to a hotel in order to have a room. You can do this through a different digital means. And a lot of attention has been focused on Airbnb in the past years because most of the hotel revenue comes from rooms, right? 70, 80% most of the time. However, what hoteliers fail to realize is that it's not just the rooms business that is being dematerialized. The hotel pickup is now called Uber. The in-room entertainment is called Netflix. The concierge service is called Google Maps. The business corner is called Zoom, etc., etc. So the entire offering and added value of a traditional hotel is actually being dematerialized. So if you think about it, you can book yourself an absolutely amazing Airbnb in Paris, like top luxury. You can get picked up with a limousine from Uber. You can have delivered to you some of the top Indian food with Deliveroo or Uber Eats. You can have your personal trainer that comes in with you to help you do the thing. You can use your meditation app in the morning. So do you still need to go to a hotel? Questionable, right? So once hoteliers agree to that analysis, they need to think, what is our role? What can we offer that those digital offsprings cannot? And that's when branding starts to be very interesting, because branding becomes a compass for what's next. Maybe to draw a parallel, not to completely speak just about hotels. If you're a hairdresser, for instance, right? Depending on how you frame yourself, depending on how you position yourself, you can offer very different type of services. So a hairdresser, typically before the coronavirus, would say, I'm a guy who cut hair in a hair salon, right? That's how it would be positioned. Right now, there's no salon anymore. So what are you? Well, you can be a guy who doesn't cut hair without the salon, but that's not a good value proposition. So you could say, well, actually, I'm a guy who knows how to take care of hair. So that's a very different brand promise. So once you reframe it and you say, I'm the guy who knows how to take care of hair, what are the things you can offer? Well, you can have, I don't know, a e-shop that shows people how, that sells a shampoo to people. You can have a tutorial about taking care of your hair. You can sell a home kit to do braids yourself. I don't know. Then it's endless because your branding is different. And I think hoteliers have to understand that. It's tough. 80% of your business comes from rooms. Why change?
Not to go down this rabbit hole too much, but how should marketing branding respond to the pandemic? So you're saying, post-pandemic, you probably have to reposition the brand promise in some cases. But what about during the pandemic? Like, we could take an example of a hotel if you want, but right now you've got very little business. I would say almost zero business. Do you therefore just stop marketing, or do you market knowing that eventually customers will come back, and this is the chance to gain share of voice, for example? What are you telling your clients?
Well, I'm obviously biased, right? Because the more people do marketing, the more we're gonna go through that crisis as well.
So make the case. So we know you're biased, so you have to make a really good case.
But I can make the case by simply telling you that we put our money where our mouth is, and we are doubling down at the moment in everything into marketing as a company. We are fully changing our website. We are pushing up new content. We are reaching out to new partners, and we're really doing this using a timeline that is really, really fast. Because it's very easy now to just lack the discipline and just let it slip through 1 day, 2 days, 5 weeks type of thing. And we really want to use that time to, well, number one, stay on top of the mind of everybody we work with. Number two, prepare the after. I see it like the army who's not fighting now. So let's make sure those guys are really, really trained instead of just having everybody chill. And I think that's the good moment to gain. You call it share of voice, we call it awareness share, but same thing, right? When everybody's panicking, you need to make sure you're not, and we can get more visibility, get more publication out there, get more leads. I don't expect much in terms of business conversion in the next 6 months. I think it's unlikely that we're not gonna do a record year. This being said, we just had a major project coming in literally next week that we just signed in the middle of the pandemic for a client who's launching a robot, a cobot it's called, which is about automatization of supply chain for food. So some industries are very resilient, and those industries will need branding as well. And those ones are also pushing their branding. So I think that's what brands have to do it. Beside the obvious survival thing, which is about protect your cash and make sure you don't go do anything stupid, if you can afford it, I think it makes so much sense to reach out, but not into a let me try to sell you my product to survive type of way, because you should never try to sell something when you are needy because people feel it. However, you can share a lot of value to a lot of people. We've been organizing a couple of online sessions for free, actually, to kind of give people advice about how to run with the brand during this time of crisis, simple personal branding, etc. And we have grown our audience. I think we have, 300-400 new people in our database since the beginning of the pandemic. I don't know if it's a lot or not a lot, but it's definitely people that we would not have reached out if we hadn't moved our asses. So I think that's what really brands have to do. And we're going to double down on branding and marketing effort in the next 6 months. We'll see how it goes for us. We have a very, very strong pipeline, and we have the chance to be very diversified, actually. Something I was very often criticized for by my peers, because we are active in so many different things, different countries, different industry, and it's always something that people kept on telling me, you need to focus, you cannot be an agency doing hotel and industry and luxury and education and personal branding. Well, right now, I'm very glad that we have doing this, because some industries are picking up, some are not, and we have those levels.
Would you work with tobacco companies? Would you work with arms? Where do you draw on the line in terms of the ethics of work?
Yeah, we don't work for tobacco and anything weapon related. That's a strict no, which we had to turn down a couple of times, and it actually would, from a fees point of view, they pay you for your loss of soul, so it's very profitable. But then you're gonna tell me, well, if you work for UBS, which we do, well, some of the money they invest is maybe not in the best place. So then for us, it's very, very hard to draw the line. We tend to have better conditions for companies that are involved in sustainable development. So we want to emphasize that. But having a clear cut and saying anybody who's not in sustainable development we don't work with, for instance, well, it's economically not viable. So it's a bit of you quote me a little bit here, because us, I think, as an industry, let's say the marketing and branding industry as a whole, we are really guilty for the state of the world in which we are, right? Because if you look at global warming, which now is no longer a topic because there's something called COVID-19, but if you look at global warming, this is so much linked to overconsumption, right? If people were not traveling that much, buying so much clothes and eating so much beef, we would not have a problem. And the reason why they're buying so much is because they're incentivized to do so by the branding and the marketing industry. So yes, we are not the one who pulled the trigger, but we provide the gun.
Part of the solution to that overconsumption will be marketing related, right? I mean, we're going to have to create a new narrative.
The problem at the moment is the whole narrative about, let's say, green consumption it's a very negative narrative, basically saying, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. And this is really so not attractive. And if I tell you, oh, think about a sustainable fashion brand, for instance, they kind of all look the same, and you have this image of, something with linen, badly cut, and then you look like some sort of hippie. So the association of ideas linked to anything sustainable are not sexy. So how can we re-engineer the narrative, change the story, so that we can emphasize consumption that are more reasonable? If you do much more wellness and meditation, this is consumption, but it's not hurting the planet. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done at that level, and we've been doing a bit of work with Climate Kick, which is one of the major European agencies, which is funding and giving grants to sustainable projects, and we really saw the potential because, it's people in those industries. They are in there because they want to make a difference. And so they think that their value proposition is the fact that they're making a difference. And this is true for a very, very small niche audience. But from the mass, it's not the case. I met a couple of years ago, I think the co-founder of Fairphone. I don't know if you've heard about Fairphone. It's basically a smartphone that uses like material that are sourced responsibly, not destroying the planet. But the whole pitch they have is, we are nice and we are fair. And I told him, well, the problem is that, I said, who are your clients? And he said, well, 70% of our clients are people with PhDs. So highly educated people who think the cause matter, which is great, but you're not going to make an impact. Because in order to make an impact, you need to get the mass. And the problem, as sad as it is that the mass will not react to a message of restriction. So the message needs to be different.
The answer is probably not to consume less, but to consume more sustainably, right?
Yeah, consume more sustainably, consume things that don't necessarily need resources. Yep. If you consume educations, for instance, if you consume lentils instead of beef, if you consume super fancy second-hand shops like they have in Tokyo, it's different, right? So I think there's a lot that can be done at that level. And it's not, I make it sound like it's very easy to solve, while there's actually so many different forces and dynamic in that question. But I think that's at least the contribution that the branding industry can do to that. I think that's more how I see it.
I want to talk to you about your business model, because this is really interesting, and it's something that we have talked about quite a lot on this podcast, right? Which is essentially you're moving away from a sort of a static kind of hierarchical model to something which is much, much more networked, right? Because so I'll give you the chance to sort of describe how it works. But basically, if I'm in the marketing team of a company, the likelihood is that over time my skill set's going to diminish because I'm not challenged because I'm working for the same company doing the same thing every day, right? And then what you've also understood is that there's a gap, right? If I try to sort of unbundle my marketing team and source them using freelancers via Upwork, then I still have to manage the overhead of managing all those people. And so what you're doing is you're sort of creating some sort of platform that mediates and transfers risk from both parties, right? Because you're matching the best companies with the best creative talent, but you're doing it in a way where you take responsibility for the deliverables. You take responsibility to make sure the people that work on your platform are looked after financially in terms of their mental health and so on. So it's like it's like a new category of platform company that of which there aren't many examples yet. Is the way I would describe it. How would you describe it?
I think we're definitely a hybrid, actually, in the sense that we do work with independent creative. I tend not to use the word platform because it's too associated to a kind of peer-to-peer type of model. And we don't offer this. Clients who work with us don't get to choose which designer they work with, right? So we don't we're not a matchmaker. The best we come up with so far is that we are a branding company as far as it goes. And the fact that we work with this creative network is just about how we do it. The client need to come to us because they trust Creative Supply to be the best partner for their branding needs. And how we make this happen to an extent is secondary. It's secondary because we run the entire project from strategy to implementation. We project manage it. If there are problems on client side or actually creative side, we handle that. So from a client, it's super smooth. They will never have the feeling that they are working with independent creatives. You know what I mean? They don't get that feel. So yeah, we bridge both worlds because we can access to really, really skilled specialists, let's say top 3D guy, motion design, copywriting, translation services, illustrators is a good one. But even graphic designer, because a graphic designer who is very good for a food festival is not going to be the best person for a corporate website for a bank. But most of the traditional agency, they are stuck with one or two art director, a bit like the famous chef in the kitchen. And then they just sell the same person over and over and over again. And then one day the art director leave and they have no design capacity anymore. And this is something we wanted to avoid from the beginning. And we work with a pool of different people who have different skill set, different interests. We have people who are really good art director, but they just cannot do web. But that's fine because we have someone else who can do web, etc. And this really allows us to assemble genuinely the right team for our clients. And because we don't have a hidden agenda of selling certain skills or discipline because we have to pay for it. Because, we sell it first and then we source them in a way. The way it works is very nice because we have standardized all our processes, in terms of what type of products, of services we sell, what is the process for a brand platform, a brand entity. All of these things have been super streamlined, so we're like a product company in-house. The timing it needs, the number of round of review, etc. And all the people who work with us, down to how you save your files, everything has been streamlined, which means that we can now actually just a couple of hours before our call, I had a kickoff with a team of, I think it's 7 people for a new project, and everybody's remote and everybody's on board, understanding what's going to be happening, etc. So we have the capacity to have very big creative team, like the biggest agency, right? You never have a team of more than 10 people because it's just not needed, even for very, very big projects. And we have that capacity. And what's amazing about this is that now we have these 10 people working on something. Tomorrow we have another big project that we have. We don't have a major capacity issue because we have a pool of people. Where we get the bottleneck is in the project management and the core consulting team in Zurich. So far with managing, and the company will grow its core as we go. So yeah, I think it's a very good model, and the client love it because they have one point of contact. There's one email address, and they say, hey, we need to do some 3D renderings for a new machine. Oh, we need to do a photo shoot for our new offices. Oh, we have some translation done to be done. And they know that we pick the best people. So they come to us and the quality is there, the pricing is right. Yes, there's a premium of price, but you pay the premium for what? Because you reduce the perceived risk. Now, of course, all of them know about Upwork. But if you try to book a designer on Upwork, good luck. You're going to spend half a day just sorting out, another half a day discussing with them, half a day to brief them, but then you're not even sure if they get it. And then it works if you're a small startup, makes total sense. If you are a small, mid-sized company or big company, it just doesn't make any sense to do this. You better have a strong partner that handles this for you.
100%, because you don't know if they're good or not. So you don't save any time there. And then when you actually want them to do something, as you say, you have to brief them. So there's no time saving with the briefing. And then if you want to make them part of a team, then you have to assemble all the other parts of the team. And then you have the overhead of managing that team and managing the output. So it's like, Upwork for me doesn't work.
I think it works for very specific clients.
Or very specific projects, very narrowly defined projects. But where you really want to run marketing at scale or branding at scale, it doesn't work.
Yeah, because, if you think about it, if you have a company, you don't want to rely on random people to do your brand. It's a bit like who handles your files. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is this secure? If you need something, is the guy on holiday or is he still around or is he not doing a freelancing world tour? You know what I mean? You don't want that as a partner. You need something that's more stable. And that's the role that creative have for those clients.
But I also think the converse, which is, everybody works for me, is on my payroll, doesn't work either, right? Because as you say, you don't have access to a large enough pool of people to deliver everything that a customer might want, or everything your company might want. And secondly, the people that work for you, because they don't see the variety of projects, they stop learning and they stop developing new skills. And so I think you've got to create this arbitrage, right? There's got to be, I don't know if, as you say, you get uncomfortable with the word platform, but there's got to be some party that sits between the body of freelancers and the corporates.
In any case, you need it. And either it's the client who does it directly, or it has to be someone like us who handles it for big projects or mid-sized projects, for sure.
Was it, like, on your part, a major insight that, if you want to get the best people, then, you have to look outside of your company?
It's funny. It's very personal, actually, because I started my career in a small consulting firm where I was one of the junior partners, etc. So it was a very traditional type of company. And then I moved to a, let's say, big branding agency. And I only stayed 2 months, and I just quit the place. And I realized at that point that the agency model is dead. And it took me 2 months. Actually, it took me a week, but then I tried to convince myself for the remaining weeks that it was still okay. But then I realized there's no point. Because, the typical agencies, everybody shows up on Monday, there's a brief, then everybody has a lunch together on this big, long communal table, and then there's beer ping pong on Friday afternoon. And if you look, that's the cliche of a creative agency. And from Sydney to Shanghai, they have the same pitch. And I was like, this is so weird. We, as branding company, we are meant to help our clients stand out, yet we all communicate in the exact same way. We do the exact same thing than all of our competitors. How can we be trusted by our clients to help them stand out if we're not able to do it for ourselves? It's like all the people who try to sell me digital services but have more LinkedIn followers than they have. I'm a bit like, not sure I can trust you on that. And then I saw all those people who are so comfortable in the job. You have the creative, he's a bit there, a bit coffee, a bit chill, and then the copywriter, and they're a bit chill, and nobody has their ass on fire because they're hired. And so the connection between the work you do and the results gets loosened up. It's even more true in a big company, but even already in an agency of 30, 40 people, you see it. And then people have to fill in sheets of timesheets. They have to say, on Monday morning, I work 4 hours on this project. So everybody is cheating on those sheets to make sure they look like they're doing some work, right? Because you don't want to be the one that has not the right profitability ratio, as they call it. And I was thinking, this is so dumb. It's treating people like children. It's making sure they're very comfortable. So when people are comfortable, they're not out of their comfort zone, which means they don't get creative. And at the end, they don't develop themselves. And they're just going to, be there. So I quit that whole thing. And then I promised myself that I would never go back to any agency that works with this. And then I thought I need to create mine. And that's how Creative Supply was born, actually. It was born out of a frustrating experience, which gave me the courage, if I'm honest, the courage to go out and say, well, let's do this. And then I went out there and I really looked for people. And it took me so much time, meet the creatives, you have to feel them, you have to test them. Some are good, some are bad, some say they're good, but they're not, and until I build that team, which now can grow because, people know good people and people know new people. So now it's very easy to grow, actually. The beginning was tough, but now it's very, very easy. And once we had that, now we're able to deliver projects. And it's funny because I see sometimes those agencies that were on my radar as dream employer when I'm like 5 to 6 years ago. And now we are winning pitches against them because we have a proposition which is to some clients more attractive. Some clients, the more conservative one, are very hesitant because they're a bit like, wait, but your creative team is in Paris. How does it work, etc. But it's a very good filtering mechanism because the client who react that way, we know they're not for us. Because if they cannot accept already this, how are they going to accept that we will transform their business with branding? It's too much. So they're out already.
I mean, I don't want to revisit the conversation we had earlier or in any way undermine the importance of branding. But what you're telling me, and I totally agree with, is that you've got a business model that's winning in a market because it's superior to everybody else's business model because it's based on a distributed workforce that allows you to get just access to better people at scale.
Yeah, that's it. And that allows us to scale as well.
Yeah.
Because if now you tell me, oh, we have 3 major projects coming in tomorrow, well, I'm going to be in a rush for 3-4 days just to arrange the project plan and the line up the resource. But after that, we can run it. There's no problem. On time, on track, because everything has been. So, yeah.
I mean, in a way, you're bringing a sort of digital phenomenon to the non-digital world in a way, right? Because, why is Amazon so successful? Because it delivers better quality at scale. And it's kind of difficult to do that in a service industry, but that's what you're doing. You're taking a technology business model and applying it to a service industry, and that's why it's trumping the others.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's fully done yet, because I think we have so much room for growth ahead. And saying that this is done now, it would be, it would not
hubris.
Be correct. Yeah, it's not like it's all done and now we can just relax. I think from a back-end point of view, it's always in development, from how you communicate with the team, how quality control is a huge topic with us.
Yep.
How do you make sure that the designer don't misspell the client name? Those very simple things, so operational. How to make sure that the consultant put the right date on the documents. In those little things, at the moment, the core consulting team spends too much time policing around. So we will have to the client doesn't say this, because at the end we deliver something that's great. But on our point of view, we could be much more optimal. So I think that's where this whole internal streamlining has to get much, much, much better. But we are so much far ahead than so much of our competitor, I think, because they're just, after the coronavirus, I think a lot of agencies are just in panic because they don't have their usual place where they all meet. The canteen is no longer there. All their files were on an internal folder. Some of the employees don't even have their own computer, so they used to work on a desktop. And you have all that thing, and now they must be so challenged. And for us, it's a bit like business as usual,
And how do you create a sense of belonging with a team that's distributed?
Yeah, we spoke about that. The choice we've made early on is not to pick creatives from everywhere, because the tempting thing to be say, oh, let's get creatives from anywhere, right? Because we can, but there's a couple of problems with this. The first one is a time zone problem, right? If you have the best guy in Mexico, in Shanghai, good luck coordinating the project, because we mainly work in Europe. The second one is, from a cultural point of view, it's nice if people can see each other sometimes. So we made the deliberate choice to build the creative network in Paris. Paris, because it's our second strongest market after Switzerland, and because the level of people you get in Paris is so high. There's so much competition that if you are an art director in Paris and you survive, you must be good. In Switzerland, you just sit there and if you are in Zurich, Stefan, Fabian, and Urs, and you went to school together and you charge everybody $200 an hour and nobody blinks because the market is so protectionist. If you're in Paris, you cannot do this. If you're in Paris, you must deliver. And that's why we build a network in Paris, which allows us to actually have 90% more or less of the creatives in Paris. So typically we can do every year a Christmas party in Paris. We bring all of them together. Every now and then we have meetups where not always everybody meets, right? But some people meet in physically in Paris, etc. This whole Zoom lifestyle that the whole world is used to now is actually very strong, in building a culture. You have the internal Slack channel, etc. So it's not that bad. If you take a big company, yes, you have your colleague that you see every day, but you don't see your CEO every day, right? So I think we manage it fairly well. In the future, I would love to be able to offer much more value to the people who are the member of our network, right? So that can we offer them discount on further education? What are the things that we could offer them? Could we help them with their accounting, for instance? What could be this service we could offer? Not as a revenue source for us, but more as a strengthening the link we have with our people, because you have people we've been working with for 4 or 5 years now, and it's going strong, and they just love it. They still do their things sometimes next to it. They sometimes have their client, their own project, but they like Creative Supply because it gives them access to projects they could never get otherwise.
Yeah, and you take care of the customer acquisition, right? So
exactly. They have to do this, and then when the client don't pay on time, which happens at the moment 95% of the time, we are running after the bills. But we are paying the creatives on time. So it's a win-win situation for everyone, actually.
Definitely. Great. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak to us.
Thanks, Ben. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Structural Shifts by Aperture. To learn more about us, visit aperture.co. We are strategy for the networked age. Until next time.